She sat alone in the damp basement with nothing but a flickering desk lamp, a stack of intercepted Axis naval transmissions, and a ticking clock that wasn't really ticking. It was her heartbeat. If she failed to break the final sequence before sunrise, 2,000 American sailors aboard a convoy in the North Atlantic would sail straight into a German wolf pack, waiting in the fog. The Navy didn't know the ambush location. They only knew that the answer was somewhere in the coded message sitting in front of her. And Evelyn Carter was the only civilian who could solve it in time. Outside, her neighborhood slept peacefully, unaware that war was being fought beneath their feet. Kids' bicycles leaned on front lawns, radios hummed soft jazz from open windows, and porch lights glowed like fireflies across suburban Ohio. No one imagined that inside the Carter family basement, a 22-year-old girl with ink-stained fingers and tired eyes was waging a silent battle that would never make it into newspapers, medals, or textbooks. She had no uniform, no rank, no battlefield, but she fought just the same. Her fingers trembled as she aligned the cipher wheel, matching letters to shifting numeric patterns. She repeated the same line for the 7th time. GRW 78 4N 7F7. It wasn't just a random sequence. German U-boats changed their encryption keys every 72 hours. If she didn't break this one tonight, the Navy would lose the window entirely. Hours of work would be useless. Men would die. She grabbed her pencil again, half chewed from stress, and scribbled potential pattern breaks. Her handwriting shook. The room smelled of dust, carbon paper, and coffee gone cold 3 hours ago. Her mother had brought a sandwich earlier, gently placing it on the steps without saying a word, because even she didn't have clearance to know what Evelyn was doing. The plate still sat untouched. But before this night, before the secrecy, before the pressure to save lives from a basement, Evelyn Carter was just a quiet math student at a small university. A prodigy, sure, top of her class, obsessed with solving patterns others ignored. She once cracked a professor's ciphered final exam in under an hour just for fun. She thought that would be the highlight of her year. She never imagined that fun would become war. The Navy had recruited her in silence. No press, no speeches, no family send-off. A plain-clothed agent had shown up at her door in March 1942 with a sealed envelope and a warning that she could never speak of what she was about to do. They told her she would remain at home, disguised as a civilian, because women weren't officially assigned to strategic code-breaking roles, at least not publicly. Her assignment didn't exist on paper. She didn't exist on paper. But she signed anyway. Now, months later, her palms were sweating as she recalculated a shifting numerical substitution that kept looping back to itself. Something was wrong. The Germans weren't just encrypting, they were masking coordinates through a secondary layer of misdirection, a double-keyed cipher. It meant only one thing. This wasn't a routine message. It was strategic, coordinated, lethal. Her pulse quickened. She drew a line across the message, splitting it into segments based on letter recurrence. Each repetition wasn't random. It formed a pattern resembling Enigma naval keys, but there was a variation she'd never seen before, a repeated 7-symbol cluster, then silence. She circled it. The cluster hid something, probably location coordinates, probably for the ambush. She tried one more formula, dividing sequence lengths against the Luftwaffe's older encryption schedule, and suddenly it clicked. Not mathematically, instinctively. A breakthrough not born from equations, but from intuition sharpened by months of staring into the enemy's mind. Her breath caught in her throat. She decoded the cluster slowly, whispering the translation under her breath. 48, north, 19, west. Her blood ran cold. That wasn't just any location. It was right along the convoy's route, directly in their path. And the U-boats weren't scattered, they were converging. Not a wolf pack, a trap. Evelyn pushed back her chair, heart pounding. She reached for the encrypted telephone line to relay the coordinates to Naval Command. But before she could lift the receiver, the basement door creaked. Someone was standing at the top of the stairs, breathing, listening. She froze, because she wasn't supposed to be watched. Not tonight. Not ever. For a second, Evelyn didn't move. The basement air felt heavier than the concrete walls that closed around her. The shadow at the top of the stairs didn't speak, didn't step forward, just lingered like an unwanted echo. She tightened her grip on the papers, trying to slow her breathing. She wasn't trained for field paranoia. She wasn't a spy. She wasn't OSS. She wasn't armed. She was a mathematician with a pencil and a secret capable of shifting the war's tide. The figure finally stepped forward. A familiar silhouette, her father. He descended slowly, the wood creaking under his weight, his expression unreadable. He worked at a steel plant by day, fixing machine parts and wiping grease from his knuckles with torn cloth. He shouldn't have been awake. He shouldn't have been here. He paused halfway down the steps, eyes scanning the wires, the cipher machines, the sealed Navy documents covering the table. Evelyn instantly shuffled the papers, shielding the coordinate translation as if it were fragile glass. "What is all this?" he whispered, voice low, not angry, concerned. Her throat tightened. She had sworn an oath of secrecy. Even speaking a single detail of the work was a federal offense. But lying to her own father in the middle of a war while holding intelligence that might save thousands of Americans felt like drowning in guilt. "I'm just doing contract work for Washington," she said, forcing calm. "Math, nothing you need to worry about." It was only half a lie. That's what hurt. He stepped beside her table, watching her hands tremble. He didn't understand the symbols, the rotary cipher wheel, the encrypted telegraph line running through the floorboards. But he understood fear. He saw it in her eyes. "You haven't slept in 2 days," he murmured. She didn't answer. The silence said enough. Her father sighed, nodded once, and stepped back. No more questions. No demands. Just trust. Blind and heavy. He turned to leave, whispering before ascending the stairs, "Whatever you're doing, just be careful." The moment the door clicked shut, she exhaled. Not relief, just borrowed time. She grabbed the telephone receiver and cranked the secure line. Static. She tapped the relay button. No response. The line wasn't dead. It was being intercepted. Somewhere between her basement and Naval Command, the encryption channel wasn't locking. Either the system had failed or someone else was listening. Her pulse spiked. She hung up before the signal pinged back, afraid she'd reveal the coordinates to the wrong ears. German intelligence operated domestically. Saboteurs, sympathizers, even wiretaps disguised as faulty wiring. Codebreakers like her weren't on radar, but if someone learned what she was decoding tonight, she wouldn't just be a civilian target, she'd be an asset to eliminate. She needed a new route to send the intel, a physical relay, not electronic. But that meant leaving the basement. Before she could think it through, the house lights flickered, once, twice, then stable again. She froze. Power interference wasn't normal, not at this hour, not with this much sensitive equipment running. She checked a breaker panel, all normal. Her hands shook harder. She finally wrote the decoded coordinates on a separate slip of paper and folded it twice, sliding it into her coat pocket. If she couldn't use the wire, she had to deliver the message to the nearest naval liaison office, 27 miles away. In the middle of the night? On foot? Impossible. By bus? Too slow. By car? Risky, but the only option. She powered down the cipher wheel and swept the scattered notes into a locking drawer, leaving the original encrypted pages on the desk. Those weren't dangerous. Only the translation was. She pushed the basement door open and stepped into the hallway, her shoes silent on the wood floor. The house was dark. Too dark. Her parents' bedroom door was shut, no light slipping through the bottom. The radio downstairs had stopped humming. Outside, through the window, she saw headlights. A car parked across the street. Engine off. No movement? No reason for anyone to be there at 2:47 a.m. Her breath hitched. She reached for the doorknob to leave, then stopped. If the wrong people were watching, leaving now would expose her. But staying meant the convoy sailed into death at dawn. She pressed her forehead against the cold window, whispering to herself, not in fear, but in resolve. Their lives come first. She opened the front door quietly, stepped into the freezing night, and pulled her coat tight. The message burned like fire in her pocket. The car across the street remained still. But when she stepped off the porch, the driver's cigarette flickered in the dark. Someone was awake, and someone was watching. The street was silent except for the distant hum of factory machinery and the winter wind cutting across empty lawns. Evelyn kept her eyes forward, pretending not to notice the parked car or the faint orange glow of the cigarette ember. She walked like someone heading nowhere special, just another restless civilian out for air in the middle of the night. But the folded slip of paper inside her coat felt heavier than her body, heavier than every oath she'd signed. It wasn't just coordinates, it was fate. She reached the end of the driveway and turned left, the frozen pavement cracking beneath her shoes. Each step echoed too loudly, too exposed. If the person watching suspected anything, they could follow, or worse, intervene before she reached the Navy liaison post in Cleveland. Halfway down the block, the car engine roared to life. Headlights exploded through the dark, illuminating her shadow across the road. She didn't run. Running meant guilt, panic, pursuit. Instead, she stopped and turned slowly, pretending confusion as though someone had simply startled her. The car rolled forward, slow, deliberate, like a predator circling prey. When it reached her, the passenger window lowered with a mechanical whine. A man leaned forward, fedora hat, long coat, unreadable expression. His face was half lit by the glowing cigarette between his fingers. He studied her with the kind of calm that didn't belong on suburban streets at 3 a.m. "You're out late," he said, voice smooth, almost friendly. She forced a faint smile. "Couldn't sleep." "Funny," he replied. "Neither could I." His eyes drifted to the small brown envelope peeking from her coat pocket. Too sharp, too fast. He had noticed something. She tucked the envelope deeper. "Did you need something?" The man paused, then nodded toward the direction she was headed. "Roads I see that way. Thought I'd warn you. Wouldn't want you slipping." His tone was casual, but his eyes weren't. They were calculating, observant, like someone trained to watch. A federal agent? A German operative? A local patrol officer? She couldn't tell. That made him the most dangerous kind. She simply nodded and walked past. The car didn't follow immediately. It waited, watching, letting her get distance. That was worse than pursuit. That meant he wasn't reacting, he was deciding. By the time she turned the corner, she cut left into a side alley between two houses and climbed over a fence, landing in someone's backyard garden, crushing frozen soil beneath her boots. The cold burned her lungs. She crouched behind a shed, waiting. Seconds later, the car rolled past, slowly. He was looking for her. She waited until the road went silent, then emerged and sprinted across the yard, ducking under clotheslines and cutting through another street. She didn't stop until she reached the bus terminal near the old rail yard, a place that smelled of coal, diesel, and salt. A stray dog barked in the distance. Only one bus was scheduled before dawn, a supply route into Cleveland that left at 4:10 a.m. She checked her watch. 3:26 a.m. She had 44 minutes until departure. She sat on a bench beneath a flickering streetlight, clutching her coat, pulse still unsteady. Across the road, a diner stayed open through the night, steam on the windows, a neon sign buzzing like a tired heartbeat. A place that should have felt safe, but didn't. Inside her pocket, she unfolded the paper just once more to confirm. The coordinates hadn't changed. The ink looked like iron on the page. 48 degrees north, 19 degrees west. Not random, not ambiguous. Their exact route. She closed her eyes, and in her mind, she saw the convoy. American destroyers slicing through black waves. Sailors drinking weak coffee in tight metal corridors. Letters home tucked into uniforms. Families waiting across the country. They had no idea they were being hunted. They had no idea a girl in Ohio was the only thing standing between them and an ocean grave. The sound of footsteps pulled her back. Not many, just one pair. Slow, purposeful, the kind you hear before you're grabbed. She turned her head slightly, enough to glimpse movement in her peripheral vision. A man stood near the bus schedule board, pretending to read it. Same coat length, same shoes, same stillness. It was him. He had followed her. She didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't look directly. Instead, she stood casually, like someone simply stretching her legs, and walked toward the diner. But halfway across the street, she heard his footsteps again. Faster this time, closer. She pushed open the diner door, the bell chiming loudly, drowning her heartbeat. Warm air washed over her, thick with bacon and coffee. A few night workers sat hunched over plates, and a waitress polished glasses behind the counter. Normal, safe, civilian. But the reflection in the window showed the man stepping in behind her. He wasn't letting her disappear. She slid into a booth, acting calm, but her foot was already pressed against the floor, ready to run again. Outside, the bus hissed into the station. She was out of time. The bell above the diner door jingled again as the man stepped inside, shaking off the cold. He didn't sit right away. He scanned the room, faces, exits, sight lines, like someone who had spent years sizing up threats before they had names. Evelyn lowered her eyes to the menu, though she wasn't reading. Her mind was dividing probabilities instead. 3 exits, 2 windows, 1 door behind the kitchen that might lead to an alley. If he made a move, she needed to act before he boxed her in. The waitress approached with tired kindness. "Coffee, hun?" Evelyn nodded, grateful her voice didn't have to betray her. When the waitress stepped away, the man finally sat, not directly across from her, but at the booth behind her, close enough to reach if he leaned forward. Too close to be coincidence. He didn't order anything. He just watched her reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser on the table. She felt his gaze like a spotlight on her back. He spoke quietly, voice smooth, too calm for the hour. "Strange time for a young woman to be traveling alone." Evelyn didn't turn around. "You followed me." He chuckled softly, a sound that carried no warmth. "I noticed you noticing me. That's not the same thing." She finally looked up into the reflection, eyes locked through the metallic surface. He wasn't hiding anymore. "What do you want?" she asked. The man leaned back, folding his hands. "Only to understand why someone from a quiet neighborhood in Ohio would leave her house at 3 in the morning carrying classified intelligence." Her chest tightened. He knew. The word classified was deliberate, a signal, a warning, a trap. If she answered incorrectly, she could be arrested. If she answered honestly, she could be killed. She kept her expression still. "I don't know what you're talking about." He smiled, just a slight curl of the lips. "There are only a handful of civilians in the Midwest with secure telegraph lines connected to Navy relay stations, and even fewer who keep blackout curtains in their basements." Her blood turned to ice. He had been watching longer than tonight. He leaned closer. "You're not the only one listening to the war." Her pulse hammered. "Who are you?" He hesitated, then pulled a small leather badge case from his coat, sliding it onto the table behind her. She glanced only long enough to see the emblem. Office of Naval Intelligence. Her breath escaped in a shaky exhale, not relief, but new fear. ONI operatives weren't friendly escorts. They monitored internal threats, leaks, and unauthorized intelligence handlers. She wasn't supposed to exist on paper. And if she posed a liability, they could erase her existence just as silently as they recruited her. He closed the badge case slowly. "You have something that belongs to us." She closed her fist over the envelope instinctively. "If I don't get this to command tonight, a convoy will be ambushed before sunrise." His jaw tightened just slightly, his first crack in composure. He knew she was telling the truth, or at least believed she believed it. He said, "Let me see it." She shook her head.
I'll deliver it myself. You don't have authorization to transport decoded intelligence. And you don't have authorization to stop me." That silenced him, just for a second. He wasn't used to defiance. The bus outside hissed again, doors opening as the driver checked his watch. 40 minutes had shrunk to minutes. The horizon lightened faintly with the earliest hint of dawn, time slipping like wet sand through her fingers. The O&I agent leaned forward. "You think you were chosen because of your talent? You weren't. You were chosen because you were isolated, contained, easy to control." Evelyn stared at him through the reflection, eyes locked through the metallic surface. Maybe that was true once. She stood abruptly. Chairs scraped. People looked up. The waitress paused mid-pour. The agent rose immediately, but she moved faster. She bolted toward the exit just as the bell above the door chimed again, this time louder, desperate. The cold hit her like a slap as she sprinted for the bus. The driver was already closing the doors. "Wait!" She slammed her hand against the metal as the O&I agent shouted behind her. The doors opened just enough for her to climb on. She stumbled into the aisle, chest heaving, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. The agent ran toward the bus. The driver glanced at him, then at Evelyn, then back. "You're in trouble, aren't you?" he muttered. Evelyn swallowed hard. "If we don't leave right now, a lot of men are going to die." The driver didn't ask for proof. He just shut the doors. The O&I agent pounded once on the glass, face cold, unreadable, then watched as the bus pulled away. Evelyn collapsed into a seat, shaking, but alive, for now. Outside the window, the agent remained still, coat flapping in the wind, eyes locked on the receding bus. Not chasing, not panicked, just watching. Because this wasn't over. This was only the beginning.
The bus rumbled through the dark countryside, headlights carving narrow tunnels through fog rolling low across the road. Evelyn pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching telephone poles flicker past like silent sentries. Every mile felt borrowed, every passing minute another stretch of ocean where the convoy sailed blind toward death. She checked her watch. 4:41 a.m. Dawn would break soon over the North Atlantic. The Germans would strike at first light. U-boats surfacing just long enough to fire torpedoes, then disappearing beneath waves before escorts could triangulate. The trap she had decoded wasn't a distant possibility, it was already unfolding. The bus was mostly empty. A sleeping factory worker snored in the back row. A nurse in uniform sat clutching her lunchbox. A soldier on leave faced the window, his duffel bag at his feet, a half-written letter tucked into his pocket. "Tell Mom I'll be home by summer." He didn't know his return home depended on a piece of paper hidden in the coat of a girl sitting 5 rows ahead. He didn't know she might be too late. Her hands shook as she unfolded the coordinates again. She kept reading them like they might magically change. 48 degrees north, 19 degrees west. A single crosshair in an ocean graveyard. The bus bounced over a pothole, jerking her from thought. She shoved the note back into her pocket and forced herself to breathe. She had to hold it together. She had been chosen for this, not because she was isolated, as the O&I agent said, but because she saw patterns others missed, because she could see an ambush before it became blood in the water. But the agent's words clung to her like frost. You weren't chosen because of talent. You were chosen because you were easy to control. She wanted to believe he was wrong, but a small part of her wondered if he was right. The bus slowed as it entered downtown Cleveland, street lamps glowing amber, factories spitting steam into the early morning air. A faint hint of sunrise touched the horizon like a fuse about to ignite. She stood before the bus, fully stopped. The driver called out, "Still in trouble?" She almost laughed. "More than you know." She stepped off into the street, coat collar raised against the cold. The ONI field office was 6 blocks east, hidden behind a shipping warehouse disguised as a mundane legal records bureau. She walked fast, boots hitting pavement in sharp, echoing taps. City workers swept sidewalks, milk trucks rattled past, newsboys rolled carts of bundled papers. Headlines screamed about battles thousands of miles away, while the real war unfolded silently in her pocket. Halfway down the block, a city patrol car idled at a corner, lights off, engine running. A silhouette sat inside, not moving, just waiting. Her pulse jumped. She slowed without stopping, pretending to study a shop window. The glass reflected the patrol car faintly. The silhouette wasn't a uniformed officer. It was the ONI agent. He had beaten her here. Either he took another route where he never intended to stay behind. He only needed her to believe she escaped. He wanted to see where she would deliver the message, to confirm she wasn't a leak, a double agent, or a misinformed civilian. She walked again, slower now, testing his reaction. The car didn't move. He wasn't forcing her to stop. He wasn't intercepting her. He was waiting for proof. She reached the end of the block, heart thundering, and turned toward the warehouse district. The sidewalks thinned, streetlights flickered. Snow had drifted into gutters where boots never passed. She approached the brick building with a rusted sign, Holstein & Sons Freight Accounting, a lie carved in metal. She stepped to the door and knocked twice, then once more, exact pattern from her briefing. A keyhole slid open. "Identification?" a voice asked. She pulled her coded card from her sleeve. "Urgent naval priority, cipher relay 12B," she whispered. The door unlocked. Inside smelled of ink, dust, and secrecy. Men in plain suits sat at desks with typewriters, maps pinned to walls, radios humming with encrypted static. No medals, no flags, just war in quiet colors. A commander stood when he saw her, gray suit, hard eyes, lips pressed thin. Not a greeting, a judgment. She placed the envelope on his desk with trembling hands. "This will save the convoy." He opened it, scanning the coordinates, then the decrypted pattern. His eyes narrowed, the first hint of alarm. "Who else has seen this?" "No one," she said, "not fully." He didn't believe her. He stepped closer. "Understand something, Miss Carter. Your work is valuable, but if you ever operate outside direct authorization again, you won't be working from a basement." She swallowed. "Men are dying. I didn't have time to wait for permission." He stared at her long enough to make silence feel like punishment. Then he handed the message to a runner who vanished into a radio room. The door slammed behind him. Evelyn exhaled, shoulders collapsing with exhaustion. But before she could sit, the commander leaned close and whispered, not anger, not threat, but something colder. "We didn't assign you that message." Her breath froze. "What? You weren't supposed to receive that transmission at all." She blinked, heart sinking. "If you got it," he continued, "someone routed it to you on purpose." Her blood turned to ice. "Why?" she whispered. He shook his head. "That's what we're about to find out." Evelyn's hands were still trembling as she followed the runner into a room stacked with radios, cipher machines, and maps. The hum of equipment filled the air like a nervous heartbeat. The commander shut the door behind them, leaving her alone with men who had eyes trained to read panic as easily as a textbook. She clutched the folded slip in her pocket as if it contained her own life, not just coordinates. The room smelled of burnt coffee and ink, a mix she would never forget. Screens flickered with Morse code, charts detailing the North Atlantic like a battlefield carved in paper. Evelyn's gaze fell on one, her decoded pattern laid bare. Every line, every repetition, her hours of calculation, her intuition, her instinct, it all stared back at her. The convoy, the trap, the U-boats converging. The commander's voice was low but edged with urgency. "We've verified your work. The convoy has been rerouted. Your calculation was precise. If you had been even 5 minutes later—" He didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need him to. She could see the lives she had saved in her mind's eye. The sailors below deck, hands clenching railings, letters in breast pockets, families across the country untouched by grief tonight. Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She was Evelyn Carter, codebreaker, silent hero, invisible to history. And yet tonight she had tilted the scales of fate. The ONI agent entered quietly, leaning against the wall. He didn't speak at first, only watched. Evelyn's pulse jumped. Would he reprimand her? Arrest her? Her mind flashed back to the diner, the chase, the confrontation on the street. Everything she had risked, every step toward the command post was being measured in that gaze. Finally he spoke. "You were routed that message deliberately. Someone wanted you to decode it, to deliver it." His eyes didn't waver. "They were testing you, testing how far a civilian could go under pressure. And you passed." Her chest tightened. "Who would do that?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled a chair and sat, finally offering her the first ounce of candor she had received all night. "There are factions within naval intelligence. Some believe only trained personnel should handle these messages. Others believe innovation comes from unexpected places. You proved both right and wrong in one night." Her mind reeled. She wasn't just a civilian. She wasn't just a mathematician in a basement. She was a weapon in their eyes, invisible and unrecognized, yet capable of saving thousands. And if she had failed? The weight of that thought pressed down on her chest. The commander stepped forward and placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You'll be briefed fully tomorrow. For now, go home. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow the Navy may want to officially recruit you." She nodded silently, but something inside her had shifted. She would never see herself as just Evelyn Carter again. She had been forged into something else, someone who could confront fear, decode secrets, and stand between life and death while the world slept, unaware. The ride home was quiet, the dawn breaking soft and golden over Ohio rooftops. For the first time in months, she felt the chill of winter air on her face and recognized the beauty of ordinary life. Trees dusted in frost, smoke curling from chimneys, birds stretching wings in morning light. But she also knew life would never be ordinary again. In the basement, her cipher wheel sat silent, her papers stacked neatly. The place that had been a battlefield now felt like a shrine to her secret war. She traced her fingers along the edge of the desk, remembering every sleepless hour, every calculation, every decision that had mattered more than her own safety. Evelyn lay in bed later, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the convoy slicing through the Atlantic waves. Somewhere men she would never meet were alive because she had been present, alert, relentless. Somewhere families were untouched by grief because she had refused to wait for authorization. The ONI agent's words echoed in her mind. "You were tested. You passed." She smiled faintly, not out of pride, but understanding. Heroism often went unseen. Victory didn't require recognition. She had been a civilian in a basement, a single individual with a pencil, a cipher, and intuition sharpened by solitude. And tonight she had changed the course of history without ever leaving her home. Outside, the world awoke to the quiet hum of a nation at war. Inside, Evelyn Carter closed her eyes, finally allowing herself a deep breath. Tomorrow she might be recruited officially. Tomorrow she might face even greater challenges. But tonight,
She had been enough, and that was all that mattered.